Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for being here and listening to my presentation. My name is Jiani Li, and I'm a second-year psychology major at the University of California, Los Angeles. I work in a UCLA Social-Cognitive Neuroscience lab directed by Dr. Matthew Lieberman. And today my presentation is going to be about state open-mindedness moderates the effectiveness of self-affirmation in enhancing receptivity to counter-attitudinal information. I know that's a lot, but to summarize, it's when using self-affirmation to make it easier to receive opposite information, how open-minded we already are matters. So the motivation behind my research is really nicely summarized by this image. So just looking at this image, you might wonder how nice it would be if one of them just can walk a few more steps to the other side of the rods to see what the other person sees. But of course, in reality, resolving conflict is not always as simple. So the overarching question that I want to address is how to encourage perspective taking. And indeed, our society has become increasingly polarized. I'm pretty sure that we all have read news about how Democrats and Republicans fight over each other all the time. But I just wanted to show a recent study by the Pew Research Center that shows that about 7 in 10 Democratic daters would not consider being in a relationship with a Trump voter. So this really shows that partisanship has far-reaching implications on every aspect of our life, and some of them even has nothing to do with politics. And also, increasing open-mindedness can have application in clinical psychology. For example, some therapies work by challenging patients' negative thinking patterns. And because these patients have unstable emotions to start with, it might be useful to think how to make it easier for the patients to accept the therapies, to absorb the information. So, what is self-affirmation? Self-affirmation is affirming one's own core personal values. So, for example, it can be done by asking what qualities do you value and when were they important to you personally? And the way self-affirmation works is we all have an intrinsic motivation to protect our self-integrity and self-worth. And because of that, when we're facing information that may challenge our pre-existing beliefs, we may turn into a defensive mode and just reject every information we receive. So self-affirmation, by reflecting on your core personal values, you're reminded of who you are essentially, and this might strengthen self-integrity and self-worth. And indeed, previous research has shown that it makes people less defensive and more receptive to information they do not agree with. For example, Reed and Aspinwall in 1998 has shown that people reduce their biased processing of health risk information after undergoing such intervention. However, what we don't know yet is, first, we don't know whether results on the efficacy of self-affirmation can replicate on different measures of open-mindedness. And also, we wonder whether people who report a similar receptiveness also show similar neural responses. So to summarize, we have two research questions. First, does self-affirmation make people more easily accept aversive information if open-mindedness is measured differently? And second, how is the effect of self-affirmation manifested in the brain? So the way we studied it was, we recruited 87 UCLA students, and all of them supported gun control. And the neuroimaging technique we use is called functional near-infrared spectroscopy, abbreviated as FNIRS. So this is an image of FNIRS. You can see that there are many wires attached to the brain, and the idea is that these optodes shine light onto the skull, and they can pick up changes in blood oxygen content. And because we know that brain activation requires oxygen, if there's activity, we will notice a change in the blood oxygen level, and which is then picked up by FNIRS. Fun fact though, one bundle of these optos costs a year of tuition, so it's really expensive. And we had a variety of measures for open-mindedness, and one of them is called latitude of acceptance. So this is the range of opinions that don't bother someone. So in our study, we used the range of opinions on gun control that don't bother someone. So in the first lab visit, participants filled out questionnaire on baseline open-mindedness. In the second lab visit, they were divided into two groups. Half of them reflected on their core personal values and described the experiences in which these core values were important to them. And for the controls, they just described what they ate. And then all of them reported open-mindedness again. And then they watched 4 political videos on gun control. 2 of them were pro-gun control and 2 of them were anti-gun control. And while they were watching the videos, they were scanned by engineers. And in the end, they reported open-mindedness again. So the first question we sought to investigate was, did self-affirmation increase self-reported open-mindedness? And we found that there was no effect of self-affirmation on self-reported open-mindedness. You can see that for the not affirmed and affirmed individuals, the post self-affirmation latitude did not differ much. But we wonder, could the effect of self-affirmation have depended on other factors, such as how the participants, how open-minded they were to start with? And indeed, we observed an interaction between pre-intervention latitude and affirmation on post-intervention latitude. So we divided samples into 3 groups based on their pre-self-affirmation latitude. And narrow latitude was defined as those individuals who have latitude that was 1 standard deviation below the mean. And wide was defined as those who had a latitude that was 1 standard deviation higher than the mean. And the rest was defined as having medium latitude. So for the narrow latitude holders, you can see that the affirmed individuals reported significantly higher post-self-affirmation latitude than the non-affirmed individuals, which suggests that affirmation worked. Affirmation increased their open-mindedness. However, no significant difference was observed for medium latitude holders and wide latitude holders. So in discussion, self-affirmation enhanced open-mindedness only for people who were close-minded to begin with, which is exactly what we want, right? Because it shows that self-affirmation worked best for people who needed it the most. And this is actually consistent with previous findings. So Nazy et al. In 2014 suggested that after receiving a similar open-mindedness intervention, only participants with extreme political ideology became more open to opposite beliefs. So what's our next step? We will continue our neurodata analysis. And there are 2 research questions we wanted to look at. First is whether activation differ when participants watch videos they agree with versus those videos they did not agree with. And second, we wanted to see for people who reported a similar open-mindedness, did their brain activation also look the same? And future research direction that can be built upon our behavioral analyses. It would be worth conducting a longitudinal study to assess how long can the effect of self-affirmation last. I wanted to thank the help I received from Professor Matthew Lieberman and also Marina Cooper-White, who is my graduate mentor. Also, the funding was provided by U.S. Department of Defense Minerva Initiative. So that's all for my presentation. In the end, we really wanted to demonstrate that barriers in communication are not insurmountable and can be alleviated by behavioral strategies like self-affirmation. We hope that by continuing to research simple strategies like self-affirmation, we can really foster diversity of ideas, which we believe has never been so important to us in this age of globalization. Thank you.